So let's talk about these 5 C's of transformational leadership. So clarity is the first one. It's our first C. In clarity, so I'm actually looking at the Fielding Graduate University site here, and they break down the 5 C's of transformational leadership. And they list here under clarity, we're talking about vision. So your ability or the propensity for a transformational leader to communicate about the vision and values. They even talk about transparency, right? So to communicate about these things in a transparent manner, but also to discuss other things in transparent manners like pay, potential or looming layoffs, all the good news, all the bad news. This is about building trust within the organization, and that's what transformational leaders do through the C of clarity. So the next C is confidence, and that's particularly poignant when it comes to transformational leaders because a word that tends to be synonymous with transformational leadership is charisma, right? It's motivating and riling up the troops, and maybe not riling up, creating enthusiasm around an idea, around the mission, about tying people to the organization. It's hard to tie people to an organization if you didn't take the first C into account, where you're very clearly articulating what are the values, what are the vision of this organization. Now people get tied to it, but if you don't have confidence in your presentation of this, it's not going to go very well. I'm like, I think the company's looking at, they focus on this, or like environments, they think it's pretty important. They think that employee rights it's a big deal to them. So communicating like that is not very confident. It does not instill confidence. But this isn't confidence is not just this. It also extends to, as they have it listed out, and you can see, faith and self. It's funny. So they just basically substituted confidence with faith. And so I don't think that that's actually the most appropriate word. I think that faith is a belief without kind of justification. Not without justification, but there's an area that you have to jump over. Like, you have to have faith that this is going to happen, even though I don't have a lot of evidence backing up. I can't show you tangible, objective metrics that back this up. Hence, like faith in God, there's not a lot of metrics, like tangible evidence that's, yes, God left his ring. So it's a different thing when you're talking about faith. So I don't agree with the Fielding Graduate University, their use of this. I think it was a lazy way, but maybe they have some sort of a justification for it that I'm not seeing. But essentially what they're saying is you want to have confidence in yourself, right? You want to understand, you want to be able to look back on what you've done and understand your capacity to act that way in the future and to perform well in the future based on what you've done and based on what you know and what you've learned and skills that you're developing, right? This is that self-confidence. And it's the same thing when you're looking at confidence, or like they say, faith in team, faith in partners. It's the same thing, right? I have confidence in my team to perform because I've assembled the team, or the people have volunteered and they're leveraging their individual character strengths and their skill sets and experience towards this in a way that makes this team functional, right? And I don't have faith in this team. I have confidence in this team. I think that they wanted to avoid the redundancy of saying confidence in this. Don't use the word in the definition. We're not trying to define confidence. I think we all have a baseline understanding of what that means. And it goes right into that. Capability, skills, wisdom, trust. That's exactly what we talked about. So that's confidence. The next C is connection. And this one holds a special place in my heart. For those of you that aren't familiar, I've actually established a new leadership approach called connected leadership that we're going to talk more about later. But for now, connection through the lens of transformational leaders is, as listed by Fielding, again, we're looking at inclusion, congruence, alignment, empathy, and compassion. I think that if you know me at all and you've been following the content, you know that I have particular special feelings about inclusion. I think that it's important to delineate. I don't want to spend too much time on this because that's not the purpose of the show, but I just think that it's important to understand the power of exclusion and the power of inclusion. And there's a time and place for both of those. The people, those working within your organization should feel included. The exclusivity is being a member of this organization, and that should be exclusive, right? You should feel there should be connection based on the fact that you're representing this organization and its name, and there's pride in working there, right? That is exclusion, and that's really good. Once you're in, then yes, we're looking at that connection. We're looking at making sure that we're taking actions as leaders that are inclusive, that are not leaving people out of the fold for any reason, because they think something different, because they look something different, because they come from somewhere different. It doesn't matter. The point is, once you're in, we let you in the circle, then you're in the circle. You got to really be in. And so if people aren't let in, then it ruins that sense of connection. Transformational leaders will also look at like a congruence, right? Alignment. So these things, I think the empathy and the compassion were highlighted really well during COVID, in the sense that we were brought more into each other's homes as remote work became more prominent and continues to remain prominent. A lot of people are going back to work, at least in some capacity, for some amount of days. Their remote work is more prominent now, and it's not, well, the percentages might wane and go up depending on the circumstance, the organization, the industry. It is going to stay. So you have to know that, and you have to be able to operate within the new space that we now live in. But it was interesting because COVID, like I said, it brought us into each other's homes in a way that wasn't really there before. And it also opened up conversations about deeper things inside of people's homes, like understanding what the risk factors were for family members and being able to open up the lines of communication around that. And that is, I think that's one of the critical parts about this connection, is your ability to communicate. So having empathy, having compassion, being able to look at your people and extend these things and have these characteristics, these almost like sub-characteristics of a transformational leader, this is critical for them in that regard. Moving on, we see commitment, right? And so this is a particularly interesting one because the sub-bullets are critical. We're looking at commitment to these sub-characteristics or these sub-bullets here. We're a commitment to purpose, commitment to people, commitment to the principles, and commitment to performance. So that's a little bit different than the other ones where they're explanatory in nature, but these are like definitive. They define the type of commitment that we're talking about. This is taking the component of clarity and pushing it one step further, right? So we know the vision. It's been clearly explained what the vision, what the values are, but what about like the purpose? This is almost like you have your vision statement and your mission statement. And so now we're looking at the mission statement. This is the how we're going to get things done, or the vision, and now it's saying purpose, so it's like, why are we getting it done? So to me, I see it as a little bit of intermixing here, but the most critical part about this is that there is, again, clarity here in this commitment to what the principles are, right? We needed to be able to explain those. Our principles should be based on our values. They're the values lived out. And that's the way the purpose is too. The purpose is the vision lived out. And we see that through performance, right? So ultimately, what the transformational leader needs to be doing here is having a commitment to their people. And that's actually where I believe some flaws lie in transformational leadership. And that is it's a certain sense of reach, and it's a certain dependence upon characteristics of individuals to be able to carry this out. Like, you have to be this type of person. You have to be that charismatic leader that can rally the troops and that can motivate your team. And the reach of this is very minuscule. Like, it's very, not minuscule, but it's very centralized. Like, your sphere of influence only really goes out, and this is per actual like studies and experiments that have been done. The effectiveness of this really only extends to those people you're directly leading. So it doesn't impact those not under your leadership. So you have to, if you want transformational leaders and you want a transformational leadership style within your organization, you have to get all of your people have to be able to live out these characteristics. Now, not everyone needs to be charismatic in the same way, but you're going to have these different flavors. And that's where we get into some of the next part of transformational leadership, the next C, creativity. So there's a huge this is the longest list, or the most amount of words, the most full little diamond that we're looking at here is creativity here under the Fielding Graduate University. Again, this is where these 5 C's are coming from. And for perspective or for context, this appears to be written in conjunction or as a response to COVID specifically. So they break down each of these in their own way, which is not exactly how I'm breaking them down. I'm looking at it at a more holistic, generalizable perspective. But they're in the article, when they break down each one of these, they're looking at that. And so you can find that at fielding.edu/transformational-leadership, but I'll try to remember to throw this in the show notes. Don't be too mad if it's not there, but it's not too hard to look up. So creativity, they're talking about innovation. And so that's interesting. Innovation can be creative, but I don't know. To me, it's leaving out the how, and I don't particularly like that. But I guess if we're just looking at kind of the characteristics, to me, that's more of an output of creativity and not an element of it, which I think is why it's counterintuitive to me. Lateral thinking, systems thinking, diversity of thought, risk-taking, continuous improvement. So I love the diversity of thought here, and that's where I was speaking a little bit on the inclusion component earlier, is that I don't care about the way that people look in my organization, in my business. I don't care who my graphics editor is. I don't care who is the head of marketing. I don't care who's making the calls. I don't care what they look like. I don't care really what they sound like. It is irrelevant to me. It's more relevant, can you get the job done? And can you do it effectively? Now, when we're looking at the more creative components of the business and not just, slamming rivets in the side of a car door, but if I'm having a marketing team or I'm having a marketing meeting with this team, I don't want 5 different people there who are that are black, that are white, that are Latino, that are Asian, that are every single Russian, that are every single walk. But they all actually grew up in downtown Manhattan and all went to the same school, because that can be a real thing because we're America. And so especially if they're several generations removed from their heritage and they're just American. That's cool. I don't have a problem with that. But I think the point of the diversity of thought, which absolutely enables higher levels of creativity and more effective end results if you're able to synthesize this effectively, is when you have different people from different perspectives, because they can look at the same message that you're trying to put out. Again, if we're following this marketing theme, they can look at this from different angles based on their experience. That's not really going to hit with my, the segment of the population that I'm familiar with. That's maybe we create another one, right? We create another ad, or we create another marketing graphic, or we shoot another video and we touch on this specifically. And so I think that's brilliant to be able to account, and that's perspectives. There's so many perspectives out there that I'm not going to have, and that we're going to be able to have a lot more creative production with these different perspectives. And there's actually an interesting story that I have about creativity when it comes to transformational leaderships, or a failure of creativity. If we look at this from the perspective of leadership in the scope of education, let's say, for instance, I'm not pulling this from any personal experience, certainly not. Wink, nudge, nudge. If you're a teacher and your purpose is to get students engaged, let's say you're a professor at a university, I don't know, maybe on Long Island. And you have an in-person class, and part of the grading scale is participation. And so the idea is, if something's graded, you're wanting to encourage high degrees of performance. You want to encourage more engagement in class if participation is graded. Does that make sense? You want to see that people are engaged, that they're learning the topics and the materials, and that all makes sense. But what happens if you only have 4 people out of a class of 35 who ever participate? I feel that the lazy and most common answer to this is saying, you had your opportunity, you just had to raise your hand and participate. If you're a transformational leader and you're embodying transformational leadership in your teaching approach, you're going to look at ways to be creative. What are other ways that I can get people to engage? What's the problem with a current engagement? Now, when you're establishing connection and empathy with your people, you're going to learn more about them, and you're going to understand that some people don't feel confident to raise their hand. Maybe they would feel more confident communicating in a small group setting. So maybe instead of having to raise your hand and voice your opinion in front of a group of 35, maybe you create some opportunities where you have some breakout groups. And then the breakout groups are all answering a question that's posed by the professor, and that they can elect a representative during that. And maybe you do this so frequently that you keep the same groups and each person rotates, so that a person, you're still going to speak in front of class because you have to confront your fears in some way, shape, or form. And it's important to build confidence to speak in front of people as you are heading out to be a professional in the real world. So we want to expose you to that, but you have your group, you've communicated with them, you're getting confident with them, and then you're just expressing kind of the summation of those thoughts, right? That's another way. There's a bunch of ways that you can do this. You can walk around to each of the groups and listen to the conversations that are happening and pay attention to the people that are participating in the group discussion, because that's still participation, and that's exactly what you want. So there's ways to do this, and you can look at this in each field, but the idea is you want to increase performance. You want to enhance engagement. That's the purpose of transformational leadership.